Welcome to the Cook's Domain. Today I'm going to cook a classic British dish and give you a little bit of the history and how we can make this the best shepherd's pie that we can possibly make it without leaving the realms of what a shepherd's pie is. I don't know why or how this happened, but I'm sure that the original recipe going back hundreds of years would have been extremely flavorful, but it seems like over the centuries it became a very basic dish, I guess because it's quite easy to cook. And believe me, I've had shepherd's pies, home-cooked shepherd's pies that were nothing but mincemeat and potato topping with virtually nothing else in there. So I'm going to show you how to make an absolutely amazing shepherd's pie. Now, this shepherd's pie will be made out of beef. There's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to be saying, no, shepherd's pie is made out of lamb, it's cottage pie when it's beef. And it's the kind of thing where people get involved when they don't really know what they're talking about. Sorry. Cottage pie and shepherd's pie has been interchangeable for a very, very long time, hundreds of years in the UK. And no one's really sure why this dish is called shepherd's pie, because the oldest origin of this is made out of beef and is called shepherd's pie. So one of the theories is that maybe it's what you would give a shepherd, because he's looking after sheep all day. The last thing he wants to do is eat sheep or eat lamb. That's one theory. But there's no real consensus on this. No one really knows why. But what is for sure is going back hundreds of years, whether you make it out of beef or whether you call it or make it out of lamb, it's been called shepherd's pie and cottage pie for both meats for hundreds of years. It's only started to become a distinction in the last 50 years. I think it's clever. I agree. Cottage pie, beef, shepherd's pie, lamb. It makes perfect sense. I agree with it. But it's not original. It's not traditional. It's new. People have only just started doing this, and literally in the last couple of decades. There was no consensus, no theory behind this. I'd say the general public didn't even have a clue 30 years ago. Just to clarify that point. Okay. So what is shepherd's pie or cottage pie? It's basically minced meat, or ground meat as the Americans would say, which we're going to add some herbs to it, and we're going to make a very rich, thick kind of layer of meat with it. And it has a topping of potatoes. So we're going to boil these potatoes down, and then we're going to mash them, turn them into a nice mash, which we will then top onto our meat. It then goes into the oven to crust the top, to get a nice crusty, crispy top to it. And then you have it. That's a shepherd's pie stroke cottage pie. So if you want to make it with lamb, you can. I'm using beef today. And I'm all in favor of continuing this distinction of shepherd's pie and cottage pie. So technically today I'm making a cottage pie. But like I said, historically, this is a nonsense argument and has never really been one or the other. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to chop up your potatoes. That's the first thing you want to start, all right? Peel them and chop them up to uniform sizes, then sit them in a bowl in cold water and let them sit in water for at least 10 minutes. That's to try and remove as much starch out of them. Once you've done that, drain them, and then we'll get our pan out, which have 2/3 of the way filled with water, fresh cold water. And I've salted, and we're going to put our potatoes straight into this cold water. So you always boil your potatoes for mash from cold water. So as well as our 1.5 kilos of potato that I'm using, we've got 500 grams of minced beef or ground beef. I have 1 large carrot that I've diced into little small pieces. We have 1 stalk of celery that I've absolutely cut extremely finely. And 1 small onion that I've also cut and diced quite small. And then we just need like a handful or so of peas. You can judge that for yourself. Once you've put it in, you'll have an idea of how much pea ratio you have to your meat. As for herbs, you're looking for typical traditional kind of English grown herbs, as in, what I mean by that is they don't have to be grown in England. What I mean is the kind of herbs that do grow in England. So you're talking about parsley, marjoram, thyme, rosemary, etc. I have my own mix that I use. This has parsley in it, this has marjoram in it, and it also has thyme in it. That's the mix that I use. I don't use rosemary in this personally. But we don't need a lot. This isn't very herby, all right? But it just needs it just to give a layer and a dimension to this that it otherwise wouldn't have. And believe me, I've been served many a shepherd's pie that had no herbs in it. It's, like I said, it's just meat and potato, and I find that to be quite bland. So yeah, we're going to add some of these mixed herbs. I'll show you the kind of quantities. It'll be about, for this much meat, we're talking about a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half of mixed herbs. And we're also going to need beef stock. So get your beef stock. You need about 500 milliliters. Now you might find some recipes online that tell you to add a few tablespoons of olive oil to this. Now the English or the British wouldn't have had any olive oil, especially when this dish was created. I'm sure the wealthy might have had it imported, but the regular folk wouldn't have had any olive oil. Secondly, the olive oil will give it a flavor that will take it, I think, outside the realms of what this dish is supposed to taste like. And thirdly, you can't have olive oil on too high a heat. Not just that it smokes, but it also creates a bitterness, especially if you're using extra virgin olive oil. If you really want to fry high heat with olive oil, then you've got to buy the cheaper yellowy stuff that can handle it better. But then you're just paying money for no real benefit. So I just use whatever oil that you would have. That's what I would use. Sunflower oil, vegetable oil, rapeseed oil, whatever you have. Have it on the very highest setting because we want to sear our meat. We want to get that nice caramelization on that meat. Like I said many times, we all know how good that is on a steak, yeah? That's what we want on our meat. Okay, now we don't want to crowd the pan, so 500 grams, I'm going to do it in 2 batches. And all we want to do is put our meat down. Alright, don't burn yourself, use a tool if you have to, and just spread out some of this meat along the surface because we want it to caramelize. See what I mean by browning? We want to get that nice golden brown colour on the meat. What you want to do now is turn it around so we can get some colour on the other side. Okay, once we've got everything out, just a little bit of oil at the bottom, and we can now add our celery. Keep the heat source on low. Our onions and our carrots. Just jostle them around. Just jostle them around a little bit, just to pick up any of the oils at the bottom of the pan. And now we want to just sprinkle about a teaspoon of salt. The salt's going to help bring out the moisture of these vegetables and help sweat them down easier. And now, as you can hear, the heat is dying down, so we can now turn our heat to medium. Okay, so once our vegetables have softened and dried up, so all we have is the glistening of the oil, we can now add to this a half a cup of red wine. Now, there's no idea as to whether this is traditional or not. There are some who would tell you, at least in the modern concept, it isn't traditional. But if you consider how old this recipe is and how unreliable water was back in the day, the idea that there wasn't some sort of an alcoholic fluid in here is unlikely. Also, the red wine really would have brought up the flavor of the meat. Red wine and red meat are amazing together. So just a half a cup. And all we want to do now is just help deglaze the pan here. We just want to reduce the wine. Okay, so now that the wine is pretty much reduced to nothing, we can do our next step, which is we want to take our cooked bowl of minced meat and just take a tablespoon of flour and sprinkle that around and mix that into the meat. Once we've done that, we can now drop it into our pan and mix that into. Now the meat obviously was cooled, so we can turn the heat up. And we just want to mix it for about a minute or two. We want to add to that our beef stock. Just mix that in. And now that we've got our liquid in there, we can also add our grinds of pepper. Just do it to your taste. I'll do about 10-15 grinds of black pepper. And now we can also add 1 teaspoon of our mixed herbs of parsley, marjoram and thyme. As soon as it comes up to a boil and it starts to bubble, we can turn the heat down to a simmer. Put the lid on and just let it cook for at least 40 minutes. So after about 15 minutes of boiling away in the water, your potatoes should be ready. But don't go by time, you want to be checking the potatoes. So what I do is I take a fork and I spike through the potato and feel what it feels like. And as you can see, I can still get it out. But with not a lot of pressure, it will go straight through and break. And that's where we want it. We don't want it so soft that even by spiking it, you can't pick the piece up. But you do want to be able to spike it and it separate and it break. So it breaks pretty easily, and that's what you want. Drain it completely of water. And as you can see, it's steaming now. What I do is I then put it back onto my heat, but on the very lowest setting, just for 5 minutes. And that's going to help really steam out any water liquid that the potatoes have absorbed. We want them as dry as possible. And now we want to add 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Let's mix that in. Now meat is pretty much ready. All we need to do now is add our peas. Just add as little or as much as you like, or don't even add it at all. It's completely up to you. There are those who don't like peas in their shepherd's pie. And there we go, this is ready. So heat off. Just put the lid back on until it's ready for us to use. Okay, so our potatoes are fully dried out, so now we want to turn it into mash. The way I do it is using a ricer, but if you want to actually mash these down, do so, but don't overdo it, because it will turn kind of gluey and stringy, and it won't be a very nice fluffy kind of mash. So mash it carefully, but if you've got a ricer or if you can get one, this is the best way to make mashed potato. It makes the best mashed potato ever. So just take a few pieces and just drop them straight into the ricer and straight down. Okay, so once we've put all the potato through the ricer, we now need to make it into a delicious creamy kind of mash. So first thing I'm going to add is about 20 grams of butter, and we want a teaspoon of salt, so these are half teaspoon measures, 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper. Now we can start mixing that a little bit in. We're also going to need to put 150 mils of milk. Now carefully start to mix that in, but don't overwork it. You don't want to overwork the mash. Just mix it in. Now I know it seems a little dry, but we still have one more wet ingredient to go in. Just once we've done a nice light mixing. The next thing we need is 2 eggs beaten. So I'm going to do that now. And pour that in as well. Using a fork, I'm going to work the egg in. And there we have it. This is our mash ready for topping for our shepherd's pie. Okay, so now I like to make a deep dish shepherd's pie. I like a nice thick fat layer of meat and a decent layer of potato on top. So I'll get like 4 to 6 really decent portions out of this. But you don't have to make it in a dish this, you know, this deep. You can get something that's a lot wider, a lot shallower, and just spread everything out. You'll make much smaller, like height-wise, much smaller pieces, but at least you can then spread it out more for a family, I guess, and get 8 to 10 pieces of shepherd's pie out of it. So the first thing we want to do is bring over our meat, and we want to start spooning it into our dish. Once our meat is down, we can start applying our potato topping. Now, you can do this using a piping bag, of course, and make pretty shapes, but I like to do a deep dish. So to pipe and get a shape on something that's going to be 2 inches deep isn't easy at all. So there's 2 ways of doing this. Either get at least an inch and an inch and a half of mashed down first as a base, and then you can still pipe a starry top or whatever you like over the top of all of it. Or you can do what I'm going to do today, nice and easy, and that's just to get it all in first of all, center it off, and then I'll just do a little shape with the fork. I'll show you. Never apply this and immediately start spreading. Get loads of it on, so all you're doing really is just spreading the top. Otherwise, all you'll do is end up mixing your meat layer with the potato layer and just making a bit of a mess. So just use the very top to smooth off. See, now we have a smooth top, so if you wanted to fill the rest of the potato into a piping bag and then pipe on top of this to make your nice shapes, that's completely up to you. You can definitely do that. But what I'm going to do now is just keep adding my potato layer and just keep spreading it around until I've used up all of the potato. Once we've applied the potato and we've got a smooth top, we now want to ruffle the top a little bit up because we want crispy bits. We like the crispy edges on our mash. So what I do, one technique is to take a fork and just dig in just a few millimeters and just draw lines. I mean, you can do it this way, or you can draw them diagonally if you like. So I'm going to mess up the pattern overall now just to show you. So you can do things like this if you want. And it just ruffles up the potato a little bit to create nice bits to crisp up. There we go. So I've done some straight and some diagonal. Not a great look if you ask me. Easily smoothed out if we want and start again, but it's not an issue. I'm going to eat it, so I don't care. But you can do nice patterns, go straight down and straight across and create like a tartan or a plaid kind of look, or go diagonals, do wavy lines, do whatever you like. Other methods that people do is just to shove in the fork and just lift up some of the potato like this, just to create rough edges. Okay, so you want to preheat an oven to 200 degrees Celsius, and I can tell you now that once we start cooking this, the meat layer is going to start bubbling, it's going to start pushing its way through, and we're going to get a few leaks. So I always have a bigger tray that I can sit the pie in. So if I pick that up, that way any leakages will just go straight into the tray. Let's get it in there. It's going to need about 30 minutes, or until the top is nice and golden and crispy. Okay, with about 5 minutes or so to go on the pie, I like to brush on a little melted butter over the top. And then back in the oven, just for it to crisp up and brown up a little bit more. And there we have it. Beautiful shepherd's pie, cottage pie, whatever you want to call it, with a nice crispy top, the sumptuous beef layer on the bottom, tender, absolutely full of flavor, savory, and our nice mashed potato in the middle there. Absolutely delicious. All we've got to do now is give it a little taste test. But first, Just give it a little bit of gravy over the top. Okay, so let's give this a taste. Now, of course, you can serve this with some steamed carrots, some broccoli, Brussels sprouts, green beans, anything you like. Let's just cut a little piece off here. Wow, that is so good. The different textures is incredible. Got this smooth, creamy mash. That's such a savoury meat layer at the bottom, and the crunchiness on that topping, it's incredible. The flavour's so complementing. This is a great shepherd's pie. I hope you guys give it a go, and hope you enjoy. Thank you for watching.